I'm really pleased to introduce Çigdem, Gencer, and Michael Koved, our team from Wells Fargo. Çigdem is currently the Executive Vice President for Corporate Human Resources at Wells Fargo. So this is using data analytics to understand people and human resources. This is a very, I think a lot of us, we've used data to understand customers, and now she's going to start looking at the HR and the employee side, which is also extremely important. Michael is the Senior Vice President for Digital Channel Sales and Marketing Analytics. He's also a Senior Vice President, and he supports marketing, product strategy development, and provides predictive models, segmentation, and other analytics for the sales and marketing teams. Things like campaign evaluation and sales funnel, diagnostics for online payments, mobile banking, and traditional bank products. These two I met as part of the data analytics sort of core team at Wells Fargo. These guys are leaders, and this is, another very big, very complicated global organization. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Çigdem and Michael. They're speaking, I like the title, Powering the Digital Stagecoach. All right. Welcome. Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back on campus. I was an instructor here many years ago. There wasn't electricity at the time, but we used candlelight. It was pretty exciting, actually. But I was recalling, the intervening years since I was here, and the growth in technology. There's more power in my cell phone than there was on my desktop computer. And
you had one?
I had one. I was an early geek. I'll admit it to this crowd. And the changes that it's enabled in business and other ventures is really pretty phenomenal. And we think about the stagecoach and iconic, some ways anachronistic, but we're really both on on a mission to digitize the experience for our customers. And Çigdem, you want to get started?
I thought we would start, first of all, by just kind of describing what we deal with at Wells Fargo. And so, the currency of big data has been around now for several years. And the reality is when it comes to the V part of that aspect of big data, the volume part, we at Wells Fargo have been dealing with that for decades, right? So just to give you a sense of our scale, we have 70 million customers across our footprint, and mostly I'm talking domestic here. We employ 1 out of every 500 non-farm workers in America. So we have about 280,000 employees across 90 businesses that range from crop insurance to high-end, the sort of more investment banking, diversified products kind of stuff. We're number 1 or 2 in most of our markets and many of our products that range from mortgage to our deposit base to digital products that we have. We were among the first to launch Apple Pay, and Michael can talk more about that. But the point is that we have 12 billion interactions with our customers a year. That comes through our data centers, and we have multiple data environments. So I most recently was in our enterprise data and analytics organization working with our chief data officer, and there's an enormous power to that data, and we're really starting to harness that across our entire customer experience. Because we've traditionally been very good at going deep. We haven't been as good, most large-scale companies aren't really good at giving a seamless experience, particularly those who have been around for longer than 5 years. And so for us, the challenge hasn't been the volume part. We've actually been managing data at scale and data at volume for decades. For us, the opportunity is really around variety, stitching that different kind of data from our different products, our different channels, together to serve our customers better. And so, how do we help take that data and personalize the experience back to our customers so that we don't feel, our ambition, our stated goal is to be America's bank, right? America's community bank. We want to be your neighborhood bank. So that implies a degree of we know who you are, we want to be your relationship bank, and that requires us understanding and personalizing that data down to you as a customer across anything and everything you do with Wells Fargo. So that's our challenge. And Michael is one of the leaders in doing that through our digital area.
Yeah, thanks, Çigdem. And we use a mixture of some of the big data and just other analytic technologies to do that stitching together that Çigdem mentioned. I'll elaborate a little bit more, but to give you a sense of the digital scale, we have about 5 billion presentments, which is really like a display ad or a banner on our wellsfargo.com per month. We send out about 30 million emails per month. We have about 80 million click interactions per month. And so it's a pretty deep set of data and interpretation of the data. Joy mentioned the metadata, and I really can't emphasize that enough, is to really understand what you're stitching together and to put it together in a meaningful way. We go through great lengths in order to do that because we really believe that when you come to wellsfargo.com, it's a personalized, customized experience for you. You don't have to tell your story all over again, and that we want to recommend products and services that are better suited for you than someone else coming to the site. So we make use of the information that we have about your site visits, about your product usage, to create recommendations and to be proactive and provide that advice. We are working to actually bring investment advice, not specific, but more like market trends, and to bring those to our customers as well, sensing that that's something that they want to do. We use predictive models in order to do that, and then the analytics off that to refine. We have a decision engine that ingests all the segmentation and factual information that we provide to the site, so it instantiates the site for our customers in the best way that we think is possible. Why don't I ask you, Çigdem, to describe what our strategy is to be able to harness all this. How do we go about that?
So my background has been really more on the analytics side throughout my career. And 3 years ago, I joined the Enterprise Data and Analytics Organization, which sits in our technology organization. So I went from being on the business side to the heart of our technology, very large organization. And at first, it was definitely different, right? It was slightly different language, different things they cared about. But what I learned from being there for those 3 years is how important the data management aspects. And I think Joy actually just touched on a lot of those. But they have to be at the service of the end uses, whether that's analytic teams, whether that's operationalizing either the data or the insights from the data into, so you can do informed push information, informed data products. That's a whole area we're starting to explore. And so what I've seen really over the last 3 years in particular across the industry, across multiple industries, is there's really a professionalization around the data management aspects. So we actually are recognized. These aren't just little teams that are buried out in the businesses anymore. They're actually starting to come together as a recognized set of sub-disciplines that is a little different from technology, and it has technology aspects to it, and it's a little different from the pure analytics side that the analysts sit on. So it's that piece of it, and sitting together with that and understanding that as an analyst really helped me understand what I need to do to help them help me, right? So I'm not slurping and munging data all the time. What I've also seen, though, and it's kind of this Venn diagram that's coming together, is the data management folks really need to understand the end uses better and get better at asking those questions. But at the same time, the analytic skill set is, as you all know, it's morphing a little bit towards some of that development, the programming languages. You do need to understand some of the underlying technologies to a certain degree. I think that's where we are today. I do think layers are getting built, so more people will be able to use the big data tools over time. But at least where we are today, you really do need to understand that. So, by the way, those of you in the MIDS program, you're in the right track.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's really important to understand that there's really a very close partnership and appreciation that is happening between the analytics side and the technology side. And we still have lots of analysts out there in the world that still think you can do everything in Excel. And for some things, I guess that's true. But really, by and large, most things are being done in layers with partnership from everywhere from the technology side to the programming language to the statistician who's actually understanding and getting you to the right answer so that you're not driving off the highway just because you have a lot of data. So in those terms, Michael's team actually was one of our partners in really looking at bringing that variety of data together in the marketing attribution modeling that your team did, right?
Yeah, actually. And I want to underscore, one of Çigdem's points around, being a multidisciplinary player. I saw about, nearly half the folks here are students at one level or another, and encourage you to gain skills in areas that maybe not your strength. So if you're in the data side, learn the business. If you're in the business side, understand data and technology. Your ability to play kind of both sides of the ball, or in musical terms, multiple instruments, increases your value, your ability to contribute, and I think will provide a more stimulating type of career because of the variety of things that you can do. It opens up many, many possibilities. Çigdem just mentioned the attribution work, and I feel it's a great, I'll describe in a moment, but it's a great example of the intersection of technology, business and analysis, and then applications. In the digital sales group, we have sales goals, and there's a John Wanamaker quote. He was a retailer from the 1800s back east. Philadelphia, exactly. We share a common alum there, but Philadelphia retailer, like Macy's, let's say. And he said, half of my marketing spend is going to be wasted, or 50% will be wasted. He said, I just don't know which half. And in our marketing world, literally Wells Fargo spends hundreds of millions of dollars on advertising. And so which is the 50% that's working? What attribution does is it enables us to be really precise about which of our marketing assets are working. In the digital space, a marketing asset would be an email. It could be a banner or a link. Those are the things that our customers can see and click on, interact with. And so by using the big data platform, we were able to do things that we could not have done in any other way. We are assembling the path using timestamps of how our customers are using the site, but which of the marketing assets are really being engaged on. And then what we want to do is say which ones are most effective. So from my view as a marketer, I want folks to enroll in a service or submit an application, start an application. Those are things I have some influence on. So what are the assets that are driving the behaviors I want to see? And this attribution methodology enables us to do that. The data there is, I have to remember, it's about 10 terabytes of data overall. And we were able to put together about 100 gigabyte table with about 50 billion rows. We found about just under 8,300 distinct paths that our customers were taking in order to get to an application start. 8,300. It figured that out in less than a minute. No kidding. And if I were trying to write that code in SQL, who would know if it was right or wrong? It'd be so complex. And there's just no way we could do that with our standard technology. And our ability to do that is really making a difference because now we can understand the customer characteristics or attributes associated not only with the pathing that we want to see, but the ones that don't. Because our biggest competitor is not other big banks or community banks, but it's Google, it's Amazon, it's eBay. eBay Amazon has great customer service. Legendary service. People pay for even more service. And that's setting a standard against which we have to compete. And so if I see paths that are not productive, that our customers are just getting frustrated, that's not good. And so we can pick those up using this technology and really make the improvements needed to benefit our customers first and foremost. So that's a little bit about the attribution, and I probably could talk all day about it. But I'm going to ask Çigdem about innovation at Wells. And Çigdem's played a very important role in fostering innovation across the bank.
I'll actually talk about two things. One, I'll just pick up on the interactions and pathing kind of thread that you started, which is, we did go with a big data platform, and one of the early proofs of concept was, can we pull together all those interactions across all our channels? So if a person was in a branch, we call them stores. If they were in a store, an ATM, online, in mobile, on the phone, they sent us an email. We've been trying to bring that together for decades, right? Lots of data. It's the variety problem. And, after about 30,000 lines of SAS code, we have another colleague of ours who's very intrepid in these sorts of things, and even he gave up after a while, years ago. But he came back at it, when we started talking about different platforms, and starting 3 years ago, they tried this out again as a proof of concept, and it actually worked. Again, in a matter of a couple of weeks, we were able to get this thing going once we had all the data together. So now what we're doing from an innovation perspective is, okay, let's operationalize that as a data set. So first of all, we've brought it all together, right? So we're creating a data reservoir around all of this kind of stuff. But then, my team had done some work around certain customer behaviors, and one of the things, we did full census analytics, right? So we were looking at, a 9 billion row table over 2 years worth of data, and what we found when you're doing full census is the reason somebody did something could range from, I lost my job, to, I don't know, I tripped on the curb and their ATM was there, right? I mean, it could be a lot of different things. It's really hard to understand. And so we started saying, well, if we could look at those interactions and understand the patterns, and the analogy I often talk about, I just did talk about this in New York last week, is, it's kind of like DNA sequencing. So we've sequenced the DNA now, right? We have it all in order by timestamp, by channel. We understand what those letters are in order. What we don't know is what all the proteins are. So now we're starting to look at how do we create reusable data assets. So it's not open data in the way Joy talked about it, but it is reusable data within, our business and for obviously our uses, to be able to understand, well, certain patterns lead to either good outcomes for our customers, or maybe there was an issue. Maybe it's an indication that they're about to buy a house, or they're about to, need some services from us. Can we start to understand what those patterns are? So we're at the beginning of that journey. It's a signal processing problem, for those of you who want to geek out on that, because there's 12 billion interactions, and we're guessing it's a few thousand of relevant signals. So it is a big problem to solve. So that's one area we're kind of working at from a how can we enable this for the whole enterprise. The other area that for us is really important, because we've traditionally been a very decentralized company, is bringing our practitioners together. So we started an analytics community of practice. I met someone from Target. I know Target has one. Joy referenced they have one. So these are, definitely something that companies are doing, because analysts tend to be embedded in the businesses. It's not a hierarchically organized function. It's not like finance. It's not like marketing, right? And so how do you bring, and they're really smart people, so how do you bring them together? So we did two things. We established an analytics leadership council. Michael sits on that, as do I. And it's about 20 of our best friends from across the bank representing all the major lines of business and functions. So I'll now be switching over to representing HR. And having conversation and data dialogues around what's really important. For us, the most common conversation actually is around talent acquisition, talent retention, and career pathing. So that's, I'd say, probably about a third of our conversations, at least, are solely around that, because it's such, especially here in the Bay Area, but nationally, we're in a really hot market, and here, especially in the Bay Area, we're competing with a lot of, flashy names down in Silicon Valley. And a lot of times we can't talk about the things that, the innovation that we're doing and what we're trying to do for our customers as openly, because we have to preserve the trust and privacy of our customers and their data. But I would say financial institutions in general are pretty leading edge on this. The other thing we did was we started a Jive site, internal, and opened it up to everybody who can self-identify as an analyst. And we've become the largest internal Jive site, other than the one like, what's your favorite quote? I'm like, that's cool, but ours actually brings people together around topics. And that thing has tripled in size now since last year, and it's really becoming a very active forum for people to talk to one another, ask questions. Hey, I tried to do this in R. Has anyone else seen that? I went to this conference. Here's a link to this really great talk we heard. And really trying to bring people together, because we literally have thousands of analysts across the bank. So that's the other place where we're both trying to bring people together, but then spread innovation out so that not everyone's reinventing fire all the time, so that they can learn from one another. The other thing we did was the Protothon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
were any of you at the Protothon?
I was looking for familiar faces.
Okay. We did a Protothon about a month ago.
It was the 13th of October.
Okay, yeah, exactly a month ago, with Cal and Stanford. When we had teams from both schools come and do an innovation Protothon with us around really how can we help the millennial segment, what kind of services are sort of that next set of services that group is looking for. And I'm happy to tell you that both the top two winning teams were from Berkeley. The top team, and they both got substantial cash prizes. And so that's something we're also trying to do, is foster closer ties with both faculty. So my team in particular that runs the analytics community of practice also has responsibility around academic partnerships. And that really goes into two threads. One is with faculty in terms of research and both using that as peer review, but also potentially collaborating on research. And then the other piece is around students and recruiting and closer ties, and the Protothon fell more in that area. So I just wanted to share some of the work we're doing in campuses as well.
Yeah, Protothon, just to fill folks in, if you're not familiar, it's a process that we use to generate ideas. And it has a premise of to really go out, to diverge your thinking, to get really broad and then to narrow. And there were 9 teams, and each had the same problem, and everyone had the same resources available to them. And it was just so cool to see at the end how each of the teams came up with really distinct solutions that it really proved again that innovation knows no bounds, and that by getting really smart and talented people together, put together just incredible assembly of ideas that really in the end I think there were several really useful products, things that we could make use of right away. And it was great to have the student energy on campus. I've heard from several since who want to be involved. I do want to put in a small plug for Wells Fargo for those of you thinking about opportunities, job opportunities going forward. There are good resources, they're really interesting problems, things that are tough to solve. And if you have a bias for action and want to be involved in business, business decision making, it's a great intersection of all that on a daily basis.
Thank you so much, Michael. We have some time for questions again. If you want to ask a question, wait for a mic.
So you talked about subject near and dear to my heart, data products, recommendations, customer-facing personalization. A lot has been talked about the analytical strategies, algorithms, technologies. I see very little focus on the user experience, presenting it with the right tone and in a way trying to explain the inexplicable.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your experience with the user experience side of data products and where you think the industry is in terms of that?
Wow, okay, really good question. So I'll talk about the Wells kind of from general and more specific. there's a whole department on user experience. So before anything gets rolled out, there's a really rigorous process for understanding what the customer needs are. And in fact, they do a whole ethnography every few years, study of how ordinary people use financial services. How do they go about organizing their financial lives? And they go on site and spend a couple hours in people's homes. Just to give you a little snippet of that, we used to have something like a data vault where you would put in all your personal information, and we thought that was a great idea. Really didn't work out so well. The contrast was someone who put all their financial information into a laundry basket, and they used that, if they went to a coffee place to do something, they would just carry in their basket. And that was like the complete antithesis of a data vault, or their vault was a laundry basket. And by doing these ethnographic type of studies, we really have a better sense of how customers interact with their financial needs. And then you layer on top of that, the site experience. We're more likely to have a more customized or better customer experience. The other side is I mentioned, Anu mentioned, the sales funnel diagnostics. That's one of the areas that, kind of like a medical perspective of, I look at, how many sessions there are, how many leads were generated, how many apps were started, finished. And when I see abnormalities in those patterns, I know something's up. And I don't know why, but that's what the team does, is drill in. So if I have the same number of sessions but not so many leads, got to look at it. Or if I don't have any sessions, what's going on there? Do I need to advertise more off-site? And so those are clues, as well as the attribution pathing, to see where there are non-productive patterns or customer usage of the site, to give me an indication of whether something isn't working or not.
Yeah, I'll add one other piece. I think, and I didn't talk about this, but I think data visualization is also becoming and that starts to link to that user experience. Data visualization is becoming a discipline or sub-discipline unto itself. And one of the things that I was talking about with my old team, and they're going to take on in 2015 as a project, is because the leader of that group, another colleague of ours, she's, that's like her thing. She loves data visualization. And when we were doing this really massive full census project, I'm pretty number savvy, right? I've been in finance, I've been an analyst, I've done sales, I deal with numbers. And some of the visualizations they were presenting me with left me scratching my head going, what are you trying to tell me? I can't navigate this picture. And so and that was really frustrating, because they were like, look, and I'm like, I don't get it. I hate those green to red, table charts. Oh my God, don't do those. Or at least brown out like half the things, because I'm like, and if you're colorblind, God help you. And so one of the things that we're talking about is, do we actually need, and let's think about how we incorporate someone who has usability, design experience, design thinking. How do humans process data, right? I actually think that whole behavioral, cognitive side of things is probably the next really big area, and people who are doing data products as their business model, right? A lot of them down in Silicon Valley have those kinds of people in there, because when they leave it to the engineers, the product fails, right? You need those kinds of people so that humans can actually absorb and understand how to use it. So I don't think we have the solution yet, and as we start to move into data products, I think banking in general is going to move there. Because we have so much data about our customers that can be of value to our customers, right? If we figure out how to present that back to you in a usable, easily digestible way that actually matters to you contextually, that would be hugely helpful. And everybody's trying to figure that out right now. But I do think it's that design thinking that analysts have not traditionally had as part of the toolkit.
Thanks for coming and talking about this. I think for a lot of the reasons you mentioned, I know I personally don't know much about what's going on with data analytics inside of a financial institution. You mentioned before that you maybe even spend up to like a third of your time talking about sort of hiring and resources and things like that. And I guess I was wondering if you could comment on how you've seen the landscape changing in terms of data science people and skills and whatnot. And if you could maybe just touch on your thoughts of, the MIDS program or what's going on here and how that relates to everything. Is something being gained, is something being lost compared to the place you got people in the past? And it'd be really fascinating just to hear your thoughts.
Do you want to start?
I'll start. I'll start. That's a great question. So one of I think among the most encouraging parts of what's going on in organizations, large companies, is the real recognition of data as a strategic asset. And they talk about the rise of the chief data officer as a exhibit A for that companies, large companies, or in the government are willing and able in making the trade-off in favor of having a chief data officer and making data part of their essential part of their strategy. That you don't develop strategy without having really tight data, and you have to deliver on that as well. That the data actually can feed operational systems that are used to guide a customer experience. So that's the really encouraging part, that there's institutional acceptance and awareness. And because of that, I think there's more and more positions being opened and filled with people who possess the ability to grasp both the data, the technology, and the business piece. That's what I referenced before. And that there's just going to be more and more of that. There is more need, and I think through Berkeley, the iSchool, that it's supplying all types of organizations with people who have that fundamental knowledge and that background and ability to be effective within an organization. So I think this is the beginning of a very big wave, a real sea shift in how organizations get their job done, and that it's really becoming a multidisciplinary, multifunction type of organization, that some of the silos are getting broken down. And in a place like ours, we don't, in my area, we don't do our strategy without having the data points to support our direction and to substantiate the budgets that we do have. Yeah.
So, we're still even just looking for pure statisticians, right? So we have, we're often looking even in the more, traditional backgrounded people still, because we have such an installed base of analytic needs in general. But we're definitely, we just have a lot of open positions at all times, so there's lots of opportunity. From a data scientist perspective, what I would say is, because we've struggled with this a lot, so I started with a team of me, and we built, and we built a whole team. It's still a dozen people, right? It's not huge, and I'm not a big believer in huge, massive data teams anyway, or analytic teams rather. But what we really had to do was think about, how many data scientists, number one, do we think we really need? How many can we keep busy with interesting enough problems that they don't get bored and go work for somebody else? And secondly, how do we even go find those people, right? So one is, what's our demand? The second is, what's the supply? So I would say we're trying not to overstate the demand, because we have to make sure. We really at Wells Fargo believe in tenure. We love to have people stay at Wells Fargo. It's a place, I have 10 years at Wells Fargo, and I'm often the least tenured person in the room that has it, and so from an analytic perspective, I think analytics is a really good entry point for people coming in, but we love to keep you, right? Because the part that's irreplaceable, so you bring skills to the table that you've learned here, but the part that becomes irreplaceable and really important for us is your business knowledge about us, about how we work, about our businesses, about the context in which we're asking you to solve problems. So that business and situational context and awareness is incredibly important. If you can bring some of that to the table because you worked someplace else before, or you've done internships, or you've solved problems with companies as part of some work you've done, that just adds to your personal value. But then it's the value over time. So what have we done? We've kind of built a virtual data scientist, right? That's kind of where we've landed for now. We have some, what I would call, one or two true data scientists that kind of have that soup to nuts toolkit of programming language all the way to really deep statistical, but those are pretty rare. And so what we're saying is, well, it's really overlapping skills. So you might have someone who has the programming language to go get the data, to understand the data, architect the table. These are massive tables, so architecting the data for your analysts is really important. We'll overlap that with someone who's, we call that our data wrangler was what we used to call it. Data engineer is what we're calling it now. We then have the data specialist, the person who actually understands the data, can go find the metadata, can understand which columns we should be using, which data is really good. Don't use that source for this data. Let's go use this one. That takes actually a lot more internal knowledge. Those are usually people more we source from internally, and they're a rare breed too. And then we have more of the statistical modeling, and then we have data visualization, right? So, and that's the data artist. So we're trying to put together, one of the things I often say is analytics has gone from being a relay race where you just hand off the baton, right? It used to be one guy SQL sourced the data and threw it over and said, okay, you go clean it, and then the next person analyzed it, to it's a game of basketball or soccer, whichever where you come from, but we're passing the ball back and forth constantly. And so there's two implications to that. One, you need to understand and have an appreciation of those adjacent skill sets, but then secondly, you've got to be a team player. We are no longer in the world of this data guy who sits at his or her computer and doesn't talk to humans. That doesn't work anymore in business, at least not in our business. And so, the ability to work in a team, the ability to value and appreciate one another's skill sets, support each other, and work in that environment is also a really critical skill.
Thank you so much. We have to cut off. I'm sorry. I know there are many more questions, but we need to move on. I'm sure you can find Michael and Çigdem in the hallway at the break.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much.